Welcome to Let's Talk UCA, the podcast where we connect, collaborate, and communicate with chiropractors from around the globe. I'm Holly, and in this episode, I'm joined by Rekha Rampasad as we speak with Marc Muncila. Marc shares his journey into chiropractic, his path into leadership within the UCA, and the experiences that shaped his commitment to fairness, proportionality, and professional unity. We explore mentorship, regulation, the evolving identity of chiropractic in the UK, and the importance of creating space for diverse voices within the profession. Marc also reflects on legacy, leadership, the future of the UCA, and what it truly means to serve both patients and the wider chiropractic community.
Welcome to the one and only Marc Muncila.
Good morning, guys. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you for sharing your time with us today, Marc. As our podcast is a collaborative effort, many of our questions are actually coming from our members. So, let's jump right in.
No worries. Nothing like being grilled first thing on a Wednesday. It's all good, right?
So, first things first is you have been described as someone who leads quietly but powerfully. How did you find your way into chiropractic and then eventually into this leadership role at the UCA?
Well, time and consistency, I guess, really. I wish I could say it was talent, but that's for others to judge. No, I've always been interested in the profession at large. I think chiropractic can do wonderful things for the human population and health. And so, I graduated from AACC. I spent a year with another association or so, a couple of years, and then joined the UCA. Somebody suggested it to me. They said it would be a good fit for us. And I've been with the UCA ever since. I joined the board the following year to try and make a difference. We had an experience that changed my view of the way chiropractic was in the UK. And so I thought, well, let me throw my hat in the ring and see what I can do to help. At the end of the day, it's my profession as much as everybody else's. I wish I could tell you it's entirely altruistic, but I have a vested interest. I am a chiropractor, and I'd like to see the profession succeed.
Now, Marc, you mentioned there that you were with another association before joining the UCA. Is there an interesting story behind that as to what made you actually change?
Yeah, I think it was more at the time. One of my very good friends had a complaint, unfortunately, and I was very surprised how it was dealt with. Not so much by the association, but the general context of the entire environment of it. And because of the way they practiced, we found that friends of ours who were UCA members were very supportive, and they were very helpful to facilitate a good outcome for that individual. I mean, if that cropped up now with the change of the GCC, that it wouldn't have grown the legs it did and gone on. But it really did make me realize that there was, or in my opinion at least, there was a lack of fairness, a lack of proportionality in some of the processes at that time. You got to remember, we're going back to 2008. I mean, I'm getting old, right? It's a fair while ago, and things were handled differently back then. And I'm pleased to say that wouldn't have gone the same way now. But I did think at the time, this isn't fair. And one of my things, and it sounds a bit childlike perhaps, but I do believe very passionately in fairness, that things should be fair and reasonable and equitable. That's not to say you always get everything you want or necessarily feel that everything's quite right from your perspective, but it is about finding that reasonable middle ground of saying, is it in the right ballpark? And I think sometimes some of the perspectives are narrower than the people offering them out realize.
That's great, Marc. Thank you for sharing that. And what would you say to anybody who is thinking about joining the UCA? What are they going to benefit from in terms, especially if they do have a case come up against them?
So I think the thing about the UCA is we don't judge off the bat. I think that is something that we feel very passionate about. I know it's come up at a couple of talks in recent times, and it actually comes from a TV show that referenced the phrase. But I had a great phrase. It would say, "Be curious, not judgmental." And it's certainly something the UCA tries to ask. We try and ask why a situation has come about. We sort of speak with you and engage, rather than just go, well, people are quick to make snap judgments in this profession, and I think they're too quick and they're too harsh at times, because it's a very personal thing. Chiropractic, it is healthcare. People have lives going on, and we want to do our best for our patients, but things sometimes get colorized in an unreasonable way. So for the UCA, at least, you'll always get that support. It is a non-judgmental stance, and of course, very pleased we were able to create our arrangement with our disciplinary defence scheme, with the lawyers that we have, the wonderful John Williams, who retired last year and was a worthy winner of the Stuart Rinsberger Award, and of course now Cura Law with Jonathan Goldring and Alex Lane. So it's a very bespoke service. It's a non-insurance product, so we fund sort of directly. That's the arrangement we have with them, but it works really, really well. And it gives instant support to members, so they always feel well looked after. And of course, we have our wonderful peer and ethics team from board members, currently Paul McCrossan, Jess Hambley and Christian Caswell. So they get a call. Occasionally they'll get a call from me if those guys are busy, but we try and have those guys do it, because I do my best, but they're well skilled at it.
And, talking about the support system, how important is it to have mentorship, especially when you're coming out of chiropractic school? Because I know in your bio, you mentioned Duncan Hales as being a significant mentor. I mean, how did he help you both professionally and personally? And how do you think anybody thinking about joining the UCA, how will they gain from mentorship?
I think that question's fantastic, and I think it is something that I would certainly say to students when you come out of college, and I was one of them. When you come out of college, you'll have views that have sometimes been formed will have been formed at your time at college, and the profession is perhaps broader than some would like to acknowledge, let's say. So, when you go through university, we hope they give you the opportunity to explore ideas, and I think most do a great job. But I do think when you come out, try and be open. As I say, try and be more curious, ask more questions why people work the way they do. And, it's certainly a valuable lesson for me, because when I graduated, and say we are going back a little way here, but it was a very narrow kind of scope. I enjoyed my time at the AECC, now the HSU. It was like a small family at the time. I joked that it was a bit like going to Hogwarts, because it was just chiropractors learning this magic that's chiropractic. And the lecturers are accessible and available. It was a really family feel. And, in many ways, it is impressive to see how it's developed into such a big organization. But at that time, there was a real sense of belonging, I think. And when I graduated, I think my view of chiropractic had shifted from the engagement of the nervous system when I first saw chiropractors personally, which excited me, to perhaps being more, maybe a bit more mechanistic, if you will. I kind of lost that philosophy a little bit, although we did have it in our education. And long and short of it was, I was with someone at the time and we were looking for a job in a particular area, and this job came up in Banbury. I applied. I remember standing with Duncan. He adjusted 50 patients in an afternoon, and I'm just sat there thinking, this is unethical. But the thing that was bugging me was the fact that all of these patients seemed happy. They'd come back numerous times. They were getting great results, and I was thinking, there's something off here. And I remember challenging Duncan and saying, well, this doesn't seem right to me. And I said, look, at the very least, where's your research? Expecting him to go, oh, I don't have any. And he handed me a book on chiropractic biophysics. I think it was the cervical rehab book at the time. And there was a couple of hundred references on the first chapter alone. And all of a sudden you're kind of going, well, where was this data? And of course, it was a while ago now. It's not just biophysics, Heidi Harvick, all sorts of research institutes are producing more and more information. And it really challenged my views, but I was prepared to be challenged. And it shifted my approach to practice. I don't do biophysics these days, I have to say. Not that I don't think it's fantastic. I think Deed and his team do a wonderful job. It's just the setup I'm currently in. But it really altered my viewpoint on what chiropractic could do and what patients were happy and welcome to receive. And I think that's, as I said earlier, about the breadth of the profession. you don't have to practice how though that necessarily works. But I think have an appreciation of why people do what they do and ask some questions. And hey, even if you professionally disagree, it doesn't mean people are wrong. It just means that you have a different professional viewpoint.
And what do you think is the best way for anybody looking for a mentor? How do they go about doing that? Because sometimes coming out of college, people are not actually aware of what options are available for them. So what ideas do you suggest for them to get out and meet somebody that can give them good mentorship?
Well, I think one of the things I didn't do at college, and I think maybe I should have done in hindsight, was try and attend more external lectures. I think if you expose yourself to more external influences and such like, I think that helps give context to the profession at large. Hopefully you'll build some relationships with people who are in practice, and then go and experience their practices. Go and take some time, try some different practices and find out what's congruent for you. What works for one person doesn't necessarily mean it will work for somebody else and how they wish to care for their patients. And we have that wonderful breadth within the profession to allow that. So yeah, certainly there's the Chiro Buddy program through the UCA, which you can use to find mentors. But equally, ring up your local practice and just say, hi, I'm a chiropractic student. And I would like to say the majority of us, particularly those of us who've been out a while, know what it was like being a student, know what it was like when you're first taking your steps, and like to help. So absolutely pick up the phone, as Steve Jobs once said. If you ever want to see that was interesting about his time or finding out how to build a computer at Hewlett Packard or something like that. But he sort of said, you just got to pick up the phone. And I think things don't happen if you just sit waiting for them to happen. Sometimes you have to make them happen. So.
Mark, what do you love most about chiropractic?
Well, that is a very, very broad question, isn't it, Holly? I've always just liked helping people. I've always been interested in the human body. When I was younger, I was fairly sporty. So for me, it is very much the ability to help people, engage with them on obviously a physical level to improve their physical health. But also it's always amazing. I think because chiropractors have that time and often do give that little bit more of a personal touch, if you will, a bit more like the old-fashioned GPs did many years ago. You had a family doctor, you now often will have a family chiropractor who looks after the family. It's that support, and certainly during COVID, I think a lot of people benefited from that. And as the wonderful Henry Gillet used to say, it's always good to give somebody adjustment north of the Atlas on every visit. So it's helpful to have those conversations with patients and maybe challenge them on over some of their concepts of health or the nervous system or general lifestyle choices that they make in order for them to live healthier, happier lives. So I like the breadth of the ability to be able to do that as a chiropractor.
Now, you have been with the UCA for over a decade, Mark. What drives your deep commitment to the UCA and the profession at large? What is your why?
Honestly, it comes back to this concept of fairness and proportionality. A lot of people wouldn't agree with some of the views I have. Equally, I don't agree with the views that they necessarily have. But what I would say, I'm sure we agree on some things. And I think it's really important as a profession like chiropractic that, has been under attack over the years. It wasn't really that long ago. People went to jail and such like for being chiropractors in certain states. So for me, it is a case of giving that proportionality across the board to say, look, there is a breadth of styles of practice. There is a breadth of approaches, and providing that patients aren't being, or clients or practice members, whatever the term is people wish to use, even that's contentious these days, right? They're being looked after in a way that sort of, in the UK at least, sits within the sort of bounds that are laid down, which are, generally quite broad. People think they're quite narrow, but they're actually, the scope is not defined in the UK. So providing you're doing that and adhering to, basic standards, I think making sure that is kept as it is, I think is hugely valuable. So I know some would like it dragged more in one way than the other. The thing is, a lot of people involved, not just people like myself, but perhaps other people that sit on the other side, they all want it dragged in one direction, but really it has to be broad to be fair and proportionate to the majority of chiropractors who, let's face it, they're not at the extreme ends of the viewpoint. They sit very much within the middle.
See. And Mark, if you were to look back one day, like in the future, what what would you like your profession and personal legacy to be, like looking forward?
Honestly, the legacy question. I'm not a huge fan of the legacy question, honestly.
No?
No, and do you know why? Because I don't think I think worrying about your legacy runs the risk of limiting the decisions that you take. So for me, it will be for history to judge. I hope I got more things right than I got wrong, and I hope history bears that out. Not that I want to drag the rest of the boards that I've served on, but it's not just about the president. It is also about the other people on the board. It's a collective decision-making process. It isn't Mark's decided this or the wonderful Kevin Proudman had decided that. It is a board. So I do hope that they look back and say that, it's for them to judge, but I hope I got more things right. We were fair and proportionate and balanced. But time will tell on that one. So
Yeah. And how about personally though?
Personally,
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose I don't really give it much thought. I don't have. I suppose the way I am. I don't really have a difference between necessarily my professional persona to my personal. I think it's
Okay.
congruent. It's a reflection of me. I know some
Okay.
people have a different view on things like that, but I am who I am. I hope I'm nice and kind and listen to people and consider viewpoints, but can't always please everyone, right?
That's interesting, and I'm sure your patients would really appreciate that too. They get Mark, the Mark. Doesn't matter whether it's
Yeah,
chiropractor Mark, President Mark. They get the
yeah,
real
it
deal.
really, yeah,
That's good.
yeah,
Excellent.
absolutely.
My next question is, what does it mean to you to be a chiropractor? And I'm talking personally, professionally, physically, or spiritually,
That's a good question.
or all of the above.
I always wanted to do something that I think made an impact to my community. And chiropractic allows me to do that. And my time with the UCA is allowed to do that on perhaps more levels. The world's a wonderful place. I enjoy life. And anything I can do to contribute to society or such like is something I want to do. So I like to give my time and my talents to that if I'm able. So chiropractic's been able to tick a number of boxes for me for that. I like to be able to contribute to my patients. I hope they live healthier, happier lives. I hope that their families do so as a result. The profession as a career, you work hard, you put time in, you look after your patients. It will provide you with a very, very lovely lifestyle. It's not always easy, particularly as a lot of chiropractors are self-employed. So there are challenges with that, but that's the joy of flexibility. If you want to do something 9 to 5 and close off at the end of the day, that's cool. That's great. But if you want to have your own clinic and run associates and things like that, then yeah, that's, you're never really off the clock. But the plus side of that is people aren't also dictating your schedule. So it is a flexibility aspect for me that's wonderful about working in the profession. As far as spiritually goes, yeah, I wouldn't say I was religious, but I do think there is a power beyond this plane of existence, honestly. I do think there's an energetic nature to the universe and society. So, yeah, I find it very difficult to believe that we are having this conversation here as three souls, if you will. And then we go into a box and that's the end of it. Like the universe tends to conserve energy. I know this is a bit hippie for the viewers. I do apologize, but it's just my view.
Bring it on, Mark.
I just find it difficult to believe the universe wastes that, so whether there is a deity per se, or whether there's a level of existence that we just don't fully appreciate, this the structure for whatever reason won't let us. So I think that's doable. If it is a case that we end up in a box at the end of the day and that's the end of it, well, you know, I guess I won't have to worry about it because it'll be done, right? So, but I like to think it goes a bit beyond that. So, yeah.
Yeah, on
Great
that topic, Mark, I mean, oftentimes I will hear the phrase that, you don't choose chiropractic and chiropractic chooses you, and especially I think on a spiritual level, there has to be a reason you become a chiropractor because the challenges we face as chiropractors, you can't, you have to have a certain kind of personality and a certain strength within you to actually come through on that. Do you find that you were called to become a chiropractor, or do you feel that it was something that you chose?
Well, we're the weird ones, right? Let's be blunt. Okay. There's a lot more, like, academically, chiropractors have to be of a level to go into the sort of upper educations, right? That's just the reality of the situation. So bearing in mind they could do that, there's a whole bunch of things they can do. And let's face it, out of all of them, chiropractic is definitely not the easiest because it is a profession that sits outside. It's not always as accepted as perhaps it could or perhaps should be. The public at times thinks we're a little odd, sometimes they're right, most of the time they're not, but sometimes they're right. We have some funny ideas on the world because we don't just see things in a very sort of pill for every ill mechanistic viewpoint. We do go on that level above, which is unusual for a health professional who is often as qualified and able as chiropractors are. So yeah, I do think it is something that it has to resonate with you. If you have a list of professions, there's a number that's a lot easier to do. So if you've seen it on the list and it's resonated with you, you're picking that because it's choosing you in that sense. So I don't know if there's a divine calling, perhaps some will say there is. Certainly for me, I just love the concept of the nervous system and the time taking x-rays as well, which I think is a valuable part of the profession. It felt like a very well-rounded qualification and profession to be able to service a broad range of patients rather than being very narrowed in on one specific thing.
I just want to say, kind of on the back of what you were saying about, not everybody agrees, or sometimes, sometimes the public's right about this and that. I was on a webinar yesterday with Martin Harvey, and he said something along the lines of, if you believe, don't quote me on this, but if you believe chiropractic is as profound and incredible and magical as it is, you can't be surprised when the others resist. Have you heard this one before? Something like
Right.
that. But if you believe chiropractic is
Yes.
as wow as it is, don't be surprised when other people resist it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, of course.
Yeah.
I don't need to
Yeah.
get defensive
Mm.
when
Yeah.
other people might turn up their nose or roll their eyes. It's like, well, of course they are, because it's that amazing. Why wouldn't they?
Well,
Anyway,
absolutely. And
just thought I'd
it's
throw that in
no,
because it's
I think
fresh.
that's absolutely, oh, you're absolutely right. I think the thing is, a lot of our thought processes and choices are defined somewhat from the moment we're born. If you've been conditioned into a particular way of thinking and something challenges that, and it's not just chiropractic, it's life in general. It's
Yeah.
difficult to see it. It grates, it abuts. Your initial reaction is to react and go, "Oh, I don't like that," and that's okay. But that's just part of normality. I mean, there's. I think it's shifted over the years, but they said there's this thing about you being most like the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. That sort of concept. It kind of frames, if you will, your viewpoint, your experience, your attitudes to certain things. So it's almost intellectually what they're saying is it's an echo chamber. That's what happens. And I mean, it's probably not a surprise to people who maybe know me a bit, but I'm not a huge fan of social media, primarily because it does tend to have a bad habit of giving you just more and more of what you want, and it's divisive. It's not
The
terribly
algorithm.
helpful. It's the way the algorithms work. So for me, it is a case of I one of the things that I've been asked before is like, you don't react in confrontational situations, generally speaking. Primarily, it's because I don't take things personally. If somebody has a view, I want to be curious as to why they have that view. I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. That doesn't marry with my perspective.
Yeah.
So let's explore that. And I think one of the things we've lost, and this is perhaps a more grander thing, but I think one of the things we've lost in society is this ability as humans, as adults, as individual beings, to turn around and go, I hear what you're saying. I don't agree, but let's go and have a drink afterwards. Now it's either you either agree with everybody entirely or you have to disengage from them. And I don't think that is naturally very healthy either. I think a bit of challenge is helpful. And so having the odd friend who perhaps isn't the same as you. I've learned more from friends of mine who I perhaps tended to disagree more with than ones I've agreed with. It's easier with the ones I agree with, but it's more fun and it's more personal growth for the ones who do have different viewpoints to me.
Yeah,
You have to be prepared to let that be challenged, though.
Mark, because obviously when we challenged, we actually also start to ground in our own belief systems, and actually it solidifies what we actually believe, about the world and about chiropractic. And coming on that subject, and we're talking especially about politics within the profession, and at times it can be so divisive. In your view, how do we begin to move toward a greater unity across the profession? And specifically, what role can the UCA play in fostering this cohesion and collaboration?
It can be divisive at times. I think it's not an unfair statement to say that we agree on more than we disagree. But I also think one of the biggest problems, and really is from the way UCA is founded, is having a level of professional respect and a proportionality to it. I think that for me has always been the case. In fact, you mentioned earlier about me writing reports at first thing in the morning. Well, the UCA commented on the right touch regulation from the Professional Standards Authority, and I can assure you those documents are absolutely riveting. That it is very much about proportional representation within the profession. I get particularly, and this is a personal thing, I do tend to get a little irked when there's a debate that you do occasionally see come up. And sometimes the people involved are the ones who have trained some of the chiropractors, and they've qualified them and they've passed them. And then a chiropractor or a group of chiropractors is looking at some research and they're trying to debate it, and they're then taking them apart as to why they shouldn't be passing comment and debating on it. And you're like, but you've qualified and told them that they can review research and they've read the research and they don't agree with your viewpoint, but you're right and they're wrong. That's how it works. I think is a very simplistic argument. And so for me, I think if we want to get unity across the board, and I think certainly when you look at the alliance with ourselves, with the Scottish Association and the McTimneys, who we work very, very closely with, I think it's eminently doable. But I think you've got to make sure that all voices feel heard and acknowledged in order to have the right sort of landing point. And I think some of the things that have happened historically have not allowed that. And, people sort of say, why are there for associations? And, the UCA was created. Yeah, but why was the UCA created? The UCA was created by an incredibly well-meaning group of individuals who are passionate about the profession, who went, we're telling some of the people that are setting some of the stuff up, we don't like this, we don't agree with this. And it's not just one or two of us. There's a whole broad range there's a whole group of us here who you are ignoring. And as a result, the UCA was born and founded, and we now sit around 1,300 members. Like, that's a lot of people who are actively choosing to be part of the UCA and the values that we stand on. It's a meaningful group, and particularly when you bring in the other members of the alliance, that's a lot of chiropractors. And I think their representation within the UK and their acknowledgement and their, viewpoint and keeping things broad and reasonable and fair and transparent, I think that will lead to unity. Everybody doesn't have to agree, but we have to acknowledge that there is a broad range.
So you mentioned, a group of passionate chiropractors, and actually with some non-chiropractors as well, that came together 25 years ago to create the UCA. They had a clear mission, protect and promote vitalistic chiropractic. How has the UCA managed to stay true to that founding vision whilst also adapting to growth and change over the years?
It's easy to stick to a vision when it's congruent with the profession that you're part of. I think that's one of the things where I've always found it a bit difficult. The way the profession was set out many years ago. Now, it's not that you can't modernize, but you don't have to throw out everything that's gone before. So I think the UCA acknowledges the history, of some of which and a lot of which we still feel is very, very valuable. But we also have to bear in mind that the world is moving forward. And I'm not the greatest reader of green books. I'm not going to sit here and debate philosophy with people, because there are people far more learned and read than I. But one of my general concepts, particularly of BJ, was he was always at the leading edge of things like technology and pushing things forward. And I just feel that that is something that we can still have our roots in our past and have a firm system, if you will, and an appreciation of that. But it also shouldn't limit the things that develop and go on with research and such like and move forward. So I think the UCA has been able to adhere to the principles, but at the same time kind of go, but we can't stay still. So I think that's why the UCA has been able to endure the way it has, and more importantly, grown to the extent it has.
Okay, so Mark, we know that you're a chiropractor, and we know that you're a business owner and obviously the UCA president, but not all of our listeners, they might not know that you're also a husband, a father, and a son. What does it take for you to manage all of these very, very important roles in your life?
Lack of sleep. No, I'm joking.
That's
Is part
secret.
of it. That is part of it. Honestly, though, it's the old bags under the eyes, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate. My wife is incredibly understanding. And I think it's one of the things in the profession, particularly for those of us that try and give to the profession beyond perhaps just practice. Not that wishes to devalue anybody doing any work in practice, but sort of stuff outside. It is the partners of people who have engaged. They allow us the space, they allow us the time to do it. It's very difficult to do those things if you weren't. If my wife wasn't about and I'm up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning writing the reports, and then I'd have to be up at 6 o'clock with the kids and then going into like it just it's working as a partnership. So I think certainly the family around you is really important.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's helpful. Like I'm very fortunate. I'm close with my dad and my brother and was my mother until she passed away. And they're always useful to bounce off. I'm very blessed to have those good relationships. So yeah, I think it's a support network for, I always think that, I guess, because behind the stage, as wonderful it is to see the people on the stage, having been doing this a while, I always look at them, but then I always can't help but look at the people around them that allow to do that. And I think it's right we acknowledge the people that put themselves forward and such like, but I do also think it's important to acknowledge that there's often a team of people. And sometimes it's not even family. Sometimes it's their office staff. Do you know what I mean? They're enabling them to grab an hour in the middle of the day to take a meeting, to then go back into adjusting and management. So it's often teams of people around you allowing to do that. So we're very blessed to have those people around us.
Yeah. And for anyone listening that's inspired by all of this and wants to serve on a board or a leadership role of some kind, what advice would you give to them?
I think you've got to be honest with what you can do to start with. That's where I would start. Do you have the time? Do you have the ability? And I'm not necessarily saying that people don't, but think about, do you want to do it? Because it's not easy. One of the worst things, and Reka sits on the UCA board with me, is if you're going to offer to do it, do it. Don't offer to do it and then not be able to. Not because it's well intentioned, but it's difficult for those that are trying to push forward. So if you have a skill set, if you have a passion, if you have a desire to do it, get involved with the boards, speak to board members who have been involved. I say be open, be curious, because you are representing a group of people. The UCA is not me, it's not Reka, it's not the UCA board, it's the membership, it's a group of people. So if you have very strong views, that's great, but can you also remain open and listening? So I think that was certainly where I would suggest to people, yes, get involved, but do ask yourself, do you want to go fast on your own, or do you want to go a little slower and going together? I think that's a key question.
Being on the board does mean that you have to speak to a diverse range of people. So, how do you manage to stay grounded and be able to be rational across all the sectors of our chiropractic community, from the regulators down to all the chiropractors that we serve?
Well, Reka, am I fair and rational with the board? Is that...
Well, actually, not
Let me
yet.
put you on the
You're
spot.
usually the calm in the storm.
Well, I appreciate that, Rachel. Thank you. I suppose not having an ego helps. Like I really don't have that facet to my character where I'm certain I'm right all the time. Don't get me wrong. I do have strong opinions, but if I've got 7 or 8 people turning around and going, well, I'm not sure you're right, I think it's being malleable enough to listen and go, okay. I mean, people talk a lot about certainty, and don't get me wrong, I think there are times where certainty is a key thing, but just because you're certain doesn't always mean you're right. So I think having that collaborative approach is helpful. I think as far as reacting goes, people are generally well-meaning, I would say, and they're as passionate about their viewpoints as you may be about yours. And so I appreciate the time and effort that they take to put into things, even if sometimes I read them and think I don't share your view because I know how long it takes. So I come from the perspective, everybody's trying to do their best. And so why get upset and react to that? They're just trying to be well and intentioned. And sure, it can be frustrating and you can butt heads a bit and this, that, and the other. But does shouting ever really solve anything? Really? It's, you can shout and up and down and you can kick off and this, that, and the other, but that's not how you win friends and influence people. You get a lot more sugar than you do with vinegar, right? So I think it's that kind of, you got to be, you've got to be the rock on which the tide breaks sometimes, but at the same time, you can do that in a respectful manner. So that's how I've always tended to approach it.
Yeah, and I can definitely attest to that. And, you often create a safe space for concerns and real conversations. And I know even in board conversations, sometimes, it can get a little heated. And, I do appreciate that there's always this safe space for us all to be able to express our viewpoints. But also, why is this so important in today's chiropractic landscape?
I feel that chiropractic, and it has been on for a few years now. I think if we want to see chiropractic continue on, I think we do need well organized professional associations to represent chiropractors. I think it is important to that. I think there is a degree of organization that comes to it. I think having lots and lots of factions, of little groups of people who do some work and then burn out and things like that I think it's valuable, but I think for longevity, it needs to be more structured. And I think that's why organizations, associations like the UCA and others do provide that forum for that longevity, and they keep going. So we've got Holly on the podcast today.
Yep.
It's great to have a head office team. It's great to have an actual head office these days. That solidity that comes with it, so that, Reka, like with you and I, if we can't deal with something, we know we've still got the head office working away in the background, pushing through the visions and hopefully the agendas of such like of what's come from our members and from the board. So I think that's why those organizations are so important, to have those structures and that working going on all the time. I would love to do it whilst I'm adjusting Mr. Jones or Mrs. Smith whilst I'm in practice, but they have a view if you're trying to, write down something to the GCC whilst adjusting C7, right? It's a problem. Yeah. So it's better to have them facilitated and know we have the team at the UCA head office, Melissa, Holly, and Amber, pushing that on when we're busy doing what we love, which is of course looking after patients.
Well, considering, we were talking about goals and the visions of the UCA, it's 25 years since we started as an association. What's next for the UCA? What are the current goals? And personally, what would you like to see come to fruition over the next 25 years?
I've always said I would like to see the UCA as and I think to some extent we are, but I would like to see us more as a global player. Within the way that we operate, I would like the UCA to be a guiding light for chiropractors to fit with our philosophy. I'd like to see the stuff that we produce, other associations look at it and go, wow, that's the standard we would like to hit. So I think they're the sort of things that I would hope that we were able to achieve. I'd like us to be here in another 25 years. Hopefully we even perhaps amalgamate more of the profession so that we do have this kind of concept of unity, or at least limited kind of splitting of views. I think that would be great. I would like to see the UCA more involved in education, and supporting people that again share our values. So 25 years, as I'm sure some of the founders will attest, it's gone over pretty quick. So 25 years, if we get some of that stuff done in that, I think we'll be doing well.
Talking about education, the term vertebral subluxation has long sparked passionate debate within the profession, and more recently was referred to the GCC as a historical concept. In your opinion, what does this term and its traditional definition still hold relevance today, or is it time for a redefinition?
I just find, for me, it's a term that people use. I think it describes what we do well. I think if you provide the context to it, I do understand that in the UK, using subluxation in isolation as a rationale for care isn't considered, appropriate. That's a bigger debate as to whether that's fair or not. But I think losing the term, I think when you start chopping out bits of your history and your lexicon, I think it's a dangerous path, honestly. Do I think in essence it's a historical concept? I understand why some would look at it like that, and I think we need to do more research and data around it. And there's some very good people which the UCA have funded to look at that more. And I think as technology improves, we'll get better understanding of how the brain works when we're adjusting and things. So for me, it's part of our language. It's a dangerous precedent to set when you start chopping out history, you start chopping out language out of something that's you want to start doing that. Is that not just a different profession you're creating? It's my view. Some will disagree, I'm sure. Feel free to write in. Some will agree. Also, please feel to write to us. But for me, it's okay. They've made that statement, and we understand the rules of the game in the UK with the way our regulator works. But yeah, I mean, subluxation, right? I talk to some of my clients about it. I explain what it is. Others, I don't put as much emphasis on it necessarily. It depends on where the patient's coming from. As we said earlier, some of the stuff that we talk about is almost so far outside their realm of understanding. It's more of, for some, they will find it interesting. It was actually what got me interested in chiropractic when I first saw a chiropractor. I love that concept. So yeah, I just don't think it's right that it goes.
I'm expecting quite a few emails from that little topic. Now, talking about the regulators, how can the UCA and GCC better recognize the everyday meaningful shifts we see in chiropractic care? Example, those patient improvements that may not always show up in a large trial, but are felt deeply and consistently.
That is always a difficult one, because I mean, I suppose really the crux of it, and I'm sorry if I sound a little researchy here, but that NNT value, the number needed to treat value, obviously that's important. And when you're looking at large scale studies, if you're going to speak to somebody and say, listen, we're going to go through a process of care and you're looking for these outcomes, because that's what patients often come in with, right? They're looking for an outcome, often which are quite medicalized. They're not just necessarily coming in because they think they'll benefit from having their subluxations removed. So the majority are looking for that. I think having larger scale studies that say, listen, if that's what you're looking for, this is the percentage of people improve, that's helpful. But for me, I don't know. you see wonderful things happen in practice every day, which oftentimes you don't expect. And how do you always quantify everything mechanistically on a granular scale of what you do? It's that interaction. Like, we know you put your hands on somebody, their physiology changes. And the way that my energy is with a patient's energy, and when you're engaging with them, how do you distill that down? I think we use a very medicalized approach to evaluate something that is in essence incredibly personal. And that's not just within chiropractic. I would say that's in any sort of physical interaction or any kind of hands-on musculoskeletal, neuromusculoskeletal, massage, anything you do like that, it's your resonance with the patient. You could do exactly the same adjustment on one patient and they go and see another chiropractor and have the same adjustment, and it doesn't necessarily produce the same outcome, right? You both adjusted T4 on the left. I don't know. One got what they wanted, one didn't. So I think that energetic thing that you have with patients is really important. And I think it is difficult for the regulator, bearing in mind that the regulation is a kind of a medical kind of mechanistic concept. I think it is difficult for them to do that. But I think that's why it's so important that the processes around that have a proportionate group of people representing on there to advocate. So, well, okay, I know that was a bit out there, but they spoke with the patient and they said, look, we see X, Y, and Z going on. The evidence for this is a bit thin. And let's be clear, evidence is a bit thin across the board on a number of things. It's not just chiropractic, whether it's therapy, osteopathy, whether it's medicine themselves. I think we've got to grow up a little bit here, right? It's difficult to quantify all of this for everyone. So I think as long as it's done ethically with the patient's understanding involved, I don't see an issue with a therapeutic trial if everybody's on board going, listen, there's a case study, or actually here's my rationale. I mean, the people that we represent, they are professionals. They've gone to college. They're meant to be able to apply their thinking, their processes, and their education to a scenario for the betterment of the patient. And providing they're doing that with a rationale for care, why not give it a go? You just never know. Chiropractic is incredibly safe. It always has been. So I think we sometimes limit ourselves at our peril, really.
You brought up an important point. It's just really important for our, to get our members at the seat at the table, and and that's how we influence, what regulations do come out in future as well. You also touched on about intuition. AI seems to be creeping into all avenues of our lives. How do you see AI shaping the future of chiropractic, both in clinical practice as well as how we communicate value to our patients, the wider healthcare system, as well as data privacy?
This is providing it doesn't become sort of Terminator-esque with Skynet, right? And then, okay. So I think AI has huge potential. In fact, the UCA has been talking somewhat about it, how we can engage with it. I think for providing information to patients, I think it's going to be incredibly helpful. Probably in the realms of things like note-taking, analysis, and research, I think it'll be hugely valuable. I as sort of referencing my previous answer though, I think that human connection, I don't see how AI, maybe it's my mutterings as my whimsical inner child, but I don't see how AI is going to replace that. Will a robot delivering a perfect thrust to, I don't know, C2 be better than him? Well, I mean, I guess from a mechanical perspective, it possibly could be, but it's the way you move around the patient, it's the way you engage with them, it's the way their psychology reacts to your psychology, it's the way they do you know what I mean? There is that connective thing, which I just don't see how computers ever replace that, personally. I mean, perhaps this podcast will be pulled out in 20, 30 years and I will be proved entirely wrong. So be it. Okay. If anyone wants to listen to me in that length of time, right? I don't see how that, I find it difficult to understand how that interaction at the moment will be replaced. I I have one of those cars that drive themselves, and yeah, it's good, most of the time, but there's that extra few percent. Yeah, you kind of, yeah, still got to react. You still need a human at the wheel, right?
Yeah, it's letting go of that control as well. But like you said, if somebody gives a T4 adjustment, it'll be different for each person. And unfortunately, I can't see a time where AI will ever be able to have that energetic transfer.
No.
How do you view our ability to preserve chiropractic for future generations?
I think preserving. I think it's an interesting question, and the reason it's interesting is because preserving it is somewhat based on making sure people understand the history and where it's come from. They don't understand this concept of, well, we'll just ignore it, because so often what's happened in the past does frame and provide learnings for moving forward into the future. And I still think it's a wonderful story. I think it's a fantastic concept. I think there's value to that concept, and I do think we will be proved right on a number of those areas, particularly with regards to neurological components. In fact, some of that is absolutely coming out already. So I would like to think, providing people stay fair and balanced and are prepared to read and understand and engage, I think it will be preserved for future generations, because I think there's enough people who still highlight it and talk about it and do so. And we just need to make sure that continues on.
What role do you believe chiropractic plays in the wider healthcare system of the future? Thinking about if we're going to have such a big scope in the future, how are we going to integrate with other healthcare providers or become the primary healthcare provider?
I think the integration question, I think a lot of that is available now. I think it's just finding people who you can integrate with. And I think there is this kind of folly that it should always be pushed by chiropractors. You can only push against a system that's willing. And there are elements of certain professions who they take a view. And, I've written to a number of health professionals. I barely get a letter back. Right. There are others who in the same professions I have a good relationship with. So I think it's a cooperative of the willing as far as integration goes. As for chiropractors being primary healthcare providers, I think we need a lot more chiropractors, honestly. But I also think, there is a very, very well established system, and that is so far down the line. And with regards to the public, there's a lot of work to help the public see the value. Chiropractic utilization still isn't terribly high. It should be higher. I don't use the word should lightly. It should be higher. So I think it is a case of educating the public to make choices. It's at the end of the day, it is end users that define the services that they wish to receive. And I think chiropractic definitely has a lot to offer. So it's engaging with them in order to get them to make those choices. And I think the more they make those choices, the more there will be increasing collaboration and integration. Because if you've got people visiting people like chiropractors, getting great outcomes, going back to their other service providers, and then recounting those stories, then that will naturally run. Do you see what I mean? I also think, and this is just perhaps more of a personal point, and it's a little negative, so I do apologize, but I do think, within health professions in general, we have to acknowledge we do see everybody else's failures. There is that kind of tone that, those guys see when chiropractors haven't done so well, or this, that, and the other. Yeah, okay, but how often have you seen a patient who hasn't done well under another professional? Like, it's a nature of the beast. And so if somebody's doing well and performing, admirably under your care, they're probably not seeing other people. So, I do think when you have someone come in and they have seen other providers and go on another one that hasn't worked for, yeah, but, the ones it is working for, they're not in your office. And it's the same for us, right? So I think it's just having that reasonability of appreciation on that. So.
Interesting that you bring that up, because I just saw this on Facebook this morning and I'm going to read it out verbatim. It's all woohoo until all the doctors and specialists don't know what is wrong with you, then it's all about that wow that comes to the rescue. And this was from one of the chiropractic clinics. And I thought that is actually quite, spot on.
I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's yeah. When it comes to statistics and studies and things, it's all very helpful. But at the end of the day, if there's a 0.1% chance and you happen to be in the 0.1%, it was great for you, right? So, and that's not just chiropractic, that's cancer treatments and things like that. It's, yes, there's the NNT value, but there's also the N1. How does it impact the person getting it?
Yeah, absolutely. As president of the UCA, what excites you about the future of chiropractic in the UK?
I mean, I think when you look at the development of chiropractic over the last 25 years, and I understand the direction of some of the things that happened are not to everyone's liking. Not necessarily to my liking either, just clarity. But when you look at the systems and the mechanisms and things that we have in place, it is quite well advanced, with regards to regulation and that sort of thing. The levers are there. I think it's just making sure that we have a proportional representation on those panels to make sure they are giving a broad perspective. So I'm actually hugely encouraged. I mean, and again, I know there's some people who've had very sort of challenging times, particularly with the regulator in the UK historically. And the fitness to practice process is not fun for anyone, and I'm really pleased to see the GCC have actually acknowledged that themselves with some of the adaptations they've made. But it is, I think there is a value in patients having some kite marking and having a right to complain, say, have I been treated fairly and correctly? I think there is a value to that. But when you look at the GCC, I do think there is, and understandably so, a perspective that it was like in the early 2000s and being involved with some of the things that we see go through. It's not the case. I think chiropractors, generally speaking, at the fitness to practice processes, there's a lot more very reasonable outcomes. I'm not saying everyone's perfect. And we have to acknowledge sometimes people have fallen a little short. It does happen. People are people at the end of the day. But I think that process has come a long way. So I think as far as the UK profession goes, I think there are a lot of things to be proud of. I think there's a lot of things that could be better and changed. Absolutely. But I think, as far as development goes, I think we are doing pretty well. It's a short period of time since the Act first came in, 25, 30 years. It's not that long really. But I think we need to make sure there's enough people engaging with the process to make sure that it ends up fairly and where it should be for everyone.
Okay. So, Mark, a couple of our members, when we were asking for questions for this podcast, a couple of our members have mentioned some 2 potentially secret obsessions of yours. Skoda cars?
That's not quite true, but yeah.
No? So, well, apparently you've nearly owned every model. Is that
No,
true? Or you've owned nearly every model?
That's not entirely fair. I have had a couple of Skodas.
Okay.
As a family, I think we have had I think we're up to about 18 of them, different models. But yeah, I do like cars. That's like different cars in recent years. But yes, at one time we had a lot of Skodas. That's true. We still do have a Skoda, but we do have a couple other models as well. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Where did that all come from? Where did that love come from?
Cars or Skodas?
Both.
Look, they're fine. They're good cars. I mean, I just like cars, to be honest. My dad was always big into cars. My brother is as well as am I. They have a couple of classic cars. We used to go to car races and meets, and I used to enjoy the modifying scene and things like that. So yeah, I just, I don't know. I'm going to sound a bit blokey. When's it not fun to go fast, right? Go around a car on a track. It's exhilarating. It's fun. It's enjoyable. So yeah, there's just something about them I've always enjoyed.
Well, especially with 18 of them, I definitely didn't know that about you, Mark, but you learn something new every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second thing, which I really am curious to hear more about, is apparently there's a video of you out there of you flying a kite or a kite flying you.
Yeah, the ladder's probably fair in that one. Yes, many years ago, I did used to do quite a bit of kite flying with those sort of power traction kites. And yes, I think that was a valuable lesson in trusting your own judgment. I got a new kite for Christmas. It's one of these big quad line things. And I was up in Newcastle and my brother was with me. So I am going to somewhat blame Carl for this. But it was too windy and I knew it was too windy. And Carl was like, "Oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine." And I instead of backing down, I let my bravado get into the thought, "Oh, yeah, I'll be okay." So yes, I got hauled up and dropped from about, I don't know, 8 feet, 9 feet onto my pelvis. Could barely walk off the beach. I actually thought I'd broken my back, to be honest. The video is online. It hurt far more than it looked. I can assure you, sand is hard when you hit it from that height. But yeah, it took me about 3 months to recover from that. So I was pretty lucky. I could barely walk, like properly barely walk for the week. It took me about, I don't know, 6 to 7 weeks before I could jog again, and about 3 months before I could sprint. So I will say I didn't get a lot of sympathy from my patients during that time, which is perfectly fine. But yeah, it was a valuable life lesson in trusting your own judgment.
Fair. Well, thank you for
So,
sharing.
yes, you're very
Oh
welcome.
dear. I've
Yeah,
got some rapid fire questions for you.
sure.
If you could choose a superpower for 24 hours, what would you like? And I want to make this chiropractic related, by the way. So you've got a
Really.
superpower for 24 hours to change one thing in chiropractic. What would it be?
I mean, as boring as it sounds, I think super intelligence, right? Who wouldn't want to be the smartest
You've already got
guy?
that, Mark.
Yeah, and I'm very aware of my limitations. So, I mean, it's the old saying, isn't it? If you're the smartest guy in the room or person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room.
Fair.
And I do understand that, but I have to say there are times where, yeah, I wish I had more intelligence to kind of really calculate everything well into the future.
Okay. DD Palmer or BJ Palmer, and why?
So for me, it's BJ Palmer as much as DD was, kicked it off. I think BJ was really that developer, and I admire that. He was always at the cutting edge of things. History tells us perhaps he didn't always calculate everything correctly, but he was prepared to push the profession forward, and keep up with technology. So yeah, for that reason, I pick BJ.
Right. And you've got a table for 5 booked at your favorite restaurant. Who are your 4 guests, dead or alive? Can be anyone you want.
It's a good question, and I sometimes you get on the spot. So in other things I've done, I might have changed this, but I think the first would always be my mum. She passed away in 2020 as a result of leukemia. She had a tetanus shot, which unfortunately triggered a reaction, which developed into a blood disorder, which led to her leukemia. So I would certainly have her there. A change of pace, I would have Andy Murray. I think what Andy Murray did for tennis in the UK was phenomenal. And then really more sort of leadership kind of ones. I would pick Ross Brawn. He was the team principal at Ferrari, and then Brawn GP. And the Brawn story in Formula One, because I do like F1, is just fascinating. How he came from a situation where the team almost closed to keep it going and then win a world championship with Jenson Button, who was one of my favourite drivers at the time as well. I'd love to know more about that. Winston Churchill, because I am British, I'd love to know how, the mindset behind sort of standing down a situation with so much uncertainty, I think would be great. And then possibly, I don't know, maybe someone like Nelson Mandela. I always thought that some of the things that he's written over the years are really interesting. And it's that leadership quality, what can we do better? How do we get more people to the party? How do we lead? How do we engage? How do we stand the course? So I think, yeah, I think that would be a pretty good table.
Excellent table. If you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
Um, I say, I think, I hope I get remembered for creating a space where people could contribute. And as a result, as a group, we got more things right than we got wrong.
This has been a fascinating insight into the person behind the UCA presidency, and we could go on for many hours, I'm sure. We look forward to continuing the conversation in a future season. Marc, thank you so much for your time and also for your selfless service to the UCA.
It's the least I can do. I appreciate your time, Holly. You do a wonderful job at head office with the team and Reka. I know the podcast was a key thing that we wanted to kick off, and Reka's really led it. So, and the podcast group. So thank you both for having me, and I hope it was an adequate first episode.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Let's Talk UCA. Your feedback will help us deliver new topics and guests for future episodes. The bios of the interviewee and co-host, along with our contact links, are included in the show notes below. Thank you for listening.